In July of 2014, a group of friends travelled to England to see the remaining members of Monty Python perform together for the first time since the filmed appearance at the Hollywood Bowl. Among their classics, they performed A Lemon, Four Yorkshiremen, Lion Tamer, Lumberjack, The Bruces, Spanish Inquisition, Dead Parrot, and Always Look on the Bright Side of Life. Unfortunately, 3 of the travellers were very unwilling to speak when a video camera was running.
Our video now.
Oh, that's sad.
I have one in my face.
Screw!
Well, shit. This was sad news for John, who brought a camera capable of taking broadcast quality video. A little bit of him died at this point. When in London, they stayed at 3 different hotels because they used different hotel points to book their free stays. During the time, they saw many things. Among them, the Borough Market, with its many shops and restaurants. The infamous prison known as the Clink.
I love Denmark. That's why I came here. Be mocked by an Australian guy in England about looking like a fat Swedish film critic. Outstanding.
They went in many museums, including the Tate Modern. They viewed exhibits featuring the art of Russia, evil stepfathers, and even visited the most disgusting restroom in all of London. They walked along the Thames, seeing many of London's most iconic sights. The evening before the Monty Python show, the gang enjoyed the Fawlty Towers dining experience, with actors portraying Basil, Sybil, and Manuel serving a dinner with the typical chaos scene on the show. They visited the Tower of London to bear witness to the brutal history of the British monarchy. They even joined in on the fun. They visited the Covent Garden shopping area where Scott claimed ownership of a local cafe since it bore his rather common name. In the William and Mary Museum, they saw Zeus teabagging a lad, a Bernini bust of a notable fop of the period, and even some Egyptian things. Alf and John visited the British Museum, where Alf was disappointed to learn that the Rosetta Stone didn't have an inscription in Swedish. Everyone's favourite, predictably, was drinks at the lobby bar of one of which it became their watering hole of choice. After all the foolishness in London, the gang moved on to Paris. In Paris, Alf separated from the other 3 to stay with his wife, Anne. Scott, Kim, and John rented an apartment on Ile Saint-Louis a few short blocks away from Notre Dame. They toured the City of Lights separately, only meeting once for dinner where Alf clearly annoyed the waiter when ordering wine. Scott, Kim, and John wandered along the Seine, stopping wherever there was something to see. The Musée d'Orsay is always popular. Scott even sampled the world's worst gin fizz. One museum everyone enjoyed was the L'Orangerie. Outside was one of Rodin's The Kiss Bronzes. Inside there was the miniature Weekend at Bernie's. Run Wars, Helicopter Parents Suck, Pires, Oh Crap, I hope they don't come to our table. Degas, Epic, If I Pretend I'm Painting, They Won't Kick Me Out of the Dressing Room. Andrew Dozens, Yes, I Meant to Wear This. The Wright Brothers, Transformers. Pure French Boys, See, I Don't Have No Stinking Astigmatism. For he is, These Bitches Is Thick. And John Malkovich is the bullfighter. They enjoyed a lovely dinner at their local bistro where Kim was given her very own anal bead. John was asked to leave the apartment for a little while, so he set out to wander about the town in the evening. Since they were staying on one of the islands on the Seine, it didn't take a long walk to get some epic pictures. The next morning, it was time to continue their wanderings. Despite the periodic rain, Scott even confirmed he didn't want to speak on camera anymore.
Video?
Yeah. Say something deep.
That's all I got.
One day, Scott, Ken, and John took the train to Tours to visit some classic French chateaux in the Loire Valley. They were successful in getting to Tours on their second attempt, after missing their train on a prior day. It was all that you would expect until Scott asked to see the off-color tapestry collection. Then it got a bit weird. Still, they carried on with their tour, hoping Scott would behave for the rest of the day. At the next chateau, the tour guide used life-sized mannequins to demonstrate how small people were back in the days of the French monarchy. Then Scott stepped up and said, "And I'm bigger than you, Frenchie." By now, everyone just ignored him and the tour went on. Their tour included lunch in a vineyard that included samplings of the local wines. The final chateau was Villandry, with its elaborate, manicured gardens. Digesting lunch and having been plied with alcohol, Scott was much more well-behaved here. Then they returned to Paris. After touring Paris, all 5 of the gang piled into a car and drove to Beaune, in Burgundy, stopping along the way in the town of Chablis, where Ulf reported that Anne impersonated Benito Mussolini whenever she tried that wine. For the first time on the entire trip, everyone stayed at the same place. That was too much for Anne. She immediately bought a train ticket to the south of France for the next morning. That evening, everyone dined together and wandered through town, enjoying the projected art on the walls of the historic buildings.
Screw! That's what she said!
Being Swedish, Anne and Ulf couldn't help themselves but to dance at an outer gazebo.
I like big butts and I cannot lie. You other brothers can't deny. And when a girl walks in with an itty-bitty waist and a round thing in your face, you get sprung.
That, apparently, with their motors, and quickly retreated to their room, and was not seen again for the rest of the journey. The next morning, Scott was exactly where we had left him the night before. He claimed that he was merely practicing not being seen. The town of Beaune held a huge farmer's market in a farming town. This means that the kiosks didn't sell any produce, but rather they sold everything normally found in a mall. After Scott bought some lacy lingerie for himself, Ulf demanded that they continue wandering through vineyards and tasting local wines. Ulf continued to point out places where he had urinated on prior trips. They visited some of the world's most famous vineyards, little of which was affordable for any of the gang. They did get to try a Grand Cru during a nice lunch at a local hotel. They wandered from winery to winery, confirming that they were indeed poor. After tasting wine the whole day, the group wandered into Beaune for another delightful Burgundian dinner, complete with wine and a dessert. Afterwards, it was time for more exploration of Beaune. The next morning, it was off for more wine tasting. The most memorable wine tasting in Burgundy was at Mischief and Mayhem, where the owner offered tastings of multiple wines and even sold the gang her last bottle of Thomas Jefferson's favorite wine, a lovely Montrachet. One afternoon, Ulf, Tim, and John toured the Hospices de Beaune, a medieval hospital that was traditionally financed through selling donated wines at auction. The trained eye could see a slight difference between the accommodations given to poor patients and those provided to more well-to-do recipients of health care. After several days in Beaune, touring the Burgundy wine region, it was time to drive south along the Rhone River headed to Châteauneuf-du-Pape. Their first stop was in Ampuy, home of the Eagle Winery as well as the famed Regional Information Technology Hub, Assistance Technique Informatique. Since it was a Sunday, nothing was open, so the gang could only wander around town and just visit the local grape vineyards. Scott continued his practice of not being seen, though he did fall off. Yet again, Scott was unseen. The next stop was for lunch, in the charming town of Condrieu, in a restaurant right on the Wrong River. After lunch, which included the local wine, it was time for a pleasant stroll along the river before resuming the drive. Finally, the gang arrived in Chateauneuf-du-Pape, where Ulf declared it was time to get serious about wine tasting. After getting the lay of the land atop the hill where the famous room now stood, Scott practiced not being seen again. A game plan for the next day was formed, and they settled in for a dinner at their hotel, sampling some of the local wines before the Marathon Taste Fest started the next day. The next morning, after the town square condom dispenser was refilled, it was time to drive to Gigondas. This was a charming hillside town generally felt to be one of the better wine regions in the Rhône region. Here, each of the local producers provided samples of their wines to the local cooperative, where visitors could sample any of the wines, free of charge. The only stipulation was that the pourer could not give suggestions of what wines to try. Fortunately, a guide to another visiting group was willing to let us know his favorites, otherwise Ulf would still be there trying everything. Scott continued practicing his art of not being seen. After that, Ulf strong-armed a passing old lady into letting him taste her wine. Her cat seemed upset. Finally, Ulf wanted one more tasting in a venue that also sold art. The others thought this was a lot of wine to drink before lunchtime. After the morning tastings, the gang settled in for lunch at a delightful street-side cafe, owned by the family that makes one of the area's most well-known wines, Chateau Beaucastel. Afterwards, in a drunken rage, Ulf made everyone buy hats. The next morning, it was time for some more wine tasting. Among the wineries visited, there was Chateau de Verdier, where Scott practiced not being seen in a field tower. There was Chateau Vue John, one of John's favorite wineries. Lunch was in town, at the foot of the old ruin on top of the hill. The group agreed that this was perhaps the most scenic lunch spot any of them had ever experienced. Completely unbeknownst to the gang, they were near the entrance to the lair of a secret society. They never suspected that in the evenings, behind this unmarked door, an ancient order held bacchanalian ceremonies where the entire world order was being decided. Anywho, after lunch they continued with their wine tasting. There was this place, and many others. Their last tasting was at Domaine des Lots Solitude, well known for their bizarre dog. Since they were the last tasting group there, the poor gave the group all the open bottles to enjoy with dinner. The wines were enjoyed on the patio of their hotel, where their chef prepared a special goodbye dinner for them. The next morning, the plan was to drive to the train station in Avignon, where they would all go their separate ways. John took the TGV to the Charles de Gaulle airport for his flight home. Ulf went on to the south of France to reunite with him, where he could spend more time with her, since Swedish people have silly amounts of vacation compared to Americans. Scott and Kim took the TGV to Paris, where they boarded the Eurostar through the Channel so they could return to London and continue drinking at One Old Witch. This is a lot of bother to document the trip in this way. The next time, let's hope these slackers grow a pair and finally learn to speak on camera